Welcome and a warm welcome to the Youth Endowment Fund's Youth Sector Briefing. Shortly, I'll be sharing with you some of the insights that we found today around the youth sector's role in reducing violence. For many of you, this might be a first time. So, our vision, just for your notes, is a world where no child becomes involved in violence. Our mission, how we live the vision out, is to find what works and build a movement to put this into practice. We focus on 7 essential sectors. These are the 7 sectors that colleagues told us to spend our resources, time, and efforts in because they work most closely with the children that are most affected by violence. This youth sector briefing is aimed at funders and commissioners of youth work, which include local authority youth commissioners, PCCs, housing associations, youth funders, and policy leads, who have a real strong approach and influence on the youth sector as a whole. I'm Kelly Jackson, Head of Change for Youth Sector, and I'd like to present to you some of the emerging best bets from our research to date. The first one is, and it's important to note, that this summary is what we know to date. So there will be other findings and other insights, but I wanted to share you our top 3. The first one is promoting children and young people's access to a local youth club, prioritizing those who are vulnerable to violence. The second emerging best bet is that we should provide children and young people who are vulnerable to violence access to trusted adults and positive activities. And the third focus here, emerging best bet, is that plan effective provision, which looks at coverage of services, distribution of violence when it's taken place and where, and longevity of the services that are to reach those children. All of these important factors are singing loud from our research to date. So what is the youth sector's role in preventing violence, and how do we know this? What research stacks up to support us? First of all, it's important to share that when we say youth sector, we're talking about the ability for adults to enable young people to develop holistically, working with them to facilitate their personal, social, and educational development. We've taken this from the Youth Work National Occupational Standards as a definition. What we'll focus on is universal youth provision that is free or charges a nominal fee. We'll also focus on targeted youth provision aimed at children and young people who are involved or at risk of involvement in violence. New research has been conducted by Carmen Villa, who is a PhD student at the University of Warwick. It looks at the closure of youth club versus the impact that has on children and young people regarding crime and violence. She looked at 2019, focusing on youth clubs that were open and youth clubs that were closed and the effect it had on the young people. And what it found was that 12% of young people became more likely to commit crimes and also were more likely to commit 9 to 10% more violent crimes. But the second finding is tentative. Our emerging best bet to colleagues on this listening now who are funders and commissioners of the youth sector with a responsibility to reduce youth violence should avoid youth club deserts. That means that you should provide youth clubs within and up to 45 minutes of those children that you are most worried about who could be vulnerable to violence. Our Children's Violence and Vulnerability Report 2024 surveyed 10,000 children 13 to 17 years of age across England and Wales, and it told us that children who are most vulnerable are most likely to attend youth clubs. In fact, children who are directly affected by violence are twice as likely to attend youth clubs as those who aren't. 65% of children who have perpetrated violence and 64% of children who have been the victim of violence attended youth club in the last year regularly compared to 35% of children who did not commit violence or perpetrate violence and who had not been a victim. Quite interestingly, also on ethnicity, children who are from Black backgrounds are 64% more likely to attend youth clubs compared to 52% of mixed ethnicity and 48% of Asian children. 35% of white children attend youth clubs. These findings, although youth clubs are technically universal in terms of settings, they tell us that youth clubs have a way of reaching highly vulnerable population within our communities. And you just need to look at the gang affiliation data in this chart, where children who said and claimed to be in the gang were high 80% compared to children who were not in a gang. As funders and commissioners who are in the youth sector space, you would like access to a global bank of evidence to help you with your decision making when you're coming to funding decisions. Well, let me introduce to you the YEF Toolkit. The YEF Toolkit is an overview of existing research on approaches to preventing serious youth violence. All the evidence available today is here. 32 approaches are available for you to review at your pleasure, 24/7, 365 days a year, and it's completely free. We've worked hard to make it user-friendly. You'll see here summary cards which give you an overview of each intervention or approach. It will tell you the cost, it will give you an evidence quality, and it will tell you what the rating is in terms of impact on violent crime, which can be high, moderate, low, no effect, harmful, or not known. I would take a few minutes to check this out and put this into your artillery of different tools that you might use when thinking about commissioning. Okay, so Caleb, I'm a commissioner, I'm a funder. I want to support youth work sector colleagues to reduce youth violence in areas that I'm interested in. What programs should we be thinking about? Well, outside of youth clubs, you should be thinking about targeted sports programs and mentoring. These are two effective ways in which the youth sector can respond to reducing violence in children and young people's lives. There are others, but you'll see here that, for example, targeted art programs, we have less of an evidence quality. Art can still be used or be considered to be used as a hook for children who might not have an interest in sport. You might also consider commissioning adventure wilderness therapy for vulnerable children. But where we are placing some of the best bets would be targeted sports program and mentoring. We've reflected that there shouldn't be youth club deserts. We've reflected that targeted trusted adults and positive activities should be available to vulnerable children. And now we're thinking about planning effective provision. Firstly, coverage of services. It's important to ensure that youth services are evenly distributed and accessible across underserved areas. Secondly, distribution of violence. Where is it happening? What time is it happening? And who is it happening to? Thirdly, think about longevity. Ensure that youth provision is long-term, allowing for services to become embedded for children to maintain meaningful relationships with staff. As part of our development here, after sharing these emerging insights, we will get more research, which is underway, to share guidance for the sector. It will come in two forms. So first of all, the practice guidance will land first in winter 2025, with recommendations for commissioners and funders of youth provision and youth workers and youth work delivery organisations. We'll also produce a systems guidance in spring 2026, which will be a series of recommendations for policymakers and youth sector system leaders. There will be about 5 to 8 of them, and it'll be thinking about how can we make it easier to do what works. Here is the Children Violence and Vulnerability 2024 report, which listens to 10,000 children who were surveyed aged 13 to 17 across England and Wales. It looks at the impact on victims of violence and how it affects their behaviour, thinks about the visibility of violence on social media, looks at the drivers and solutions of youth violence, and includes thoughts from our very own Youth Advisory Board members. It's definitely worth downloading. Much of the insights that we shared today stem from this research, and it's such an important de facto piece for those of you who are responsible and have the purse strings to make a difference for many children's lives. Just want to thank you so much for stopping by to hear out this youth sector briefing. Please do keep in touch. Sign up to our YEF's newsletter to hear the latest updates. And if you want to get in touch with me, please do caleb.jackson@youthendowmentfund.org.uk. All the very best.